Hola, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to every single one of you. And thank you so much for joining us in the Reimagining Fundraising Innovation Summit 2025. We were live, it'd be woo! We're so happy you're here with us. So my name is Diana Ruano, and I'm heading up fundraising innovation at UNHCR, and I'll be your host for today. So what an incredible moment this is. Here we are connected across continents, bringing together the brightest minds, the most passionate hearts in fundraising. You're here because you care deeply about making a difference. And today we do need to talk about something urgent. I'm going to be quite direct. We really are at a crossroads, and the path we choose today will determine whether our missions survive and thrive or whether we become irrelevant. So yes, private fundraising has grown since the beginning of time, but here's an uncomfortable truth. The pace of our innovation simply does not match the scale of funding needed to work on the problems that we're trying to solve. While we've been doing much of the same things for the last 30 years, the world around us has transformed completely. Think about it. We're fighting to end poverty, world hunger, tackle climate change, protect animals, support refugees, find cure for diseases, advocate for dignity, free societies, and human rights. You name it. These are massive, urgent challenges. Yet we're still using fundraising models from 3 decades ago, while the gap between the world's needs and the funds we're able to raise continues to widen at an alarming pace. We're stuck. And if we don't break free now, we kind of risk losing everything we've worked for. The pandemic, it didn't just shock us, it exposed our vulnerabilities. Our organizations are struggling. Traditional fundraising sources are under huge pressure. Meanwhile, the private sector, it's moving fast, offering compelling alternatives to our supporters. They're not just competing with our methods, they're redefining what donors expect, and they're fulfilling the needs of donors in equally compelling ways to ours. And another uncomfortable truth, trust in our traditional approaches, well, kind of in our sector as a whole, is declining. Our supporters are looking elsewhere. And if we don't act now, not next year, not when it's convenient, now, we will lose the very people who make our work possible. Dan Pallotta said it perfectly. If we prohibit failure, we kill innovation. And if we kill innovation and fundraising, we cannot raise more revenue. We cannot grow, and we simply cannot solve the issues at hand. You're going to hear more from Dan in just a moment. So this isn't about being innovative for innovation's sake. This is about accelerating funding. This is about delivering to our mandates and to our promises. This is about staying relevant so we can continue changing lives and leading a better world for our kids. And here's the incredible part. We've already proven this works. In 2020, 14 of the world's largest international organizations did something unprecedented. All of us, organizations that usually compete, decided to collaborate, and this is how Reimagining Fundraising was born. The result, thousands of participants joined, hundreds of groundbreaking ideas, more than 100 industry experts and 200 volunteers came together. We shattered barriers. We proved that when we stop thinking about ROI or market share and start thinking about expanding the entire sector, extraordinary things can happen. More than 5 years later, we continue to work together in an honest and collaborative way and in a spirit of mutual support. So why does all this matter? Well, this brings us to today, to why we're here and why this summit and the Beacons 2025 presented, they're not just important, they're essential. Think about this. Not every organization can afford to innovate alone, but together we can rethink our business. We can share methodologies. We can compare best practices. We can run design sprints together. We can even invest collectively. This isn't about one organization winning while the others lose. This is about making the entire pie bigger. while recognizing our differences. This is about channeling way more resources and inspiring more people to support our causes. But we must shake things up. If this year has taught us anything, is that we cannot remain focused on the status quo, carrying on with our business as usual. With everything that's going on at the moment, we have a window of opportunity to do things differently. And that's why we have to change things up. And that's why we're here today. Now, before I continue, and just so we're all on the same page, today's summit will be divided into two main sections. So the first part is a fireside chat with Dan Pallotta, which I'm very excited about, and we'll introduce him in just a moment. And then the second part is the showcase of our Beacons 2025. And these represent some of the most promising new funding models emerging as income streams for nonprofits and are lighting the way forward. At the end, we'll all have the chance to vote for our favorite innovations. So please stay tuned and don't go anywhere. So speaking of shaking things up, we are honored, and what a better person to help us with this endeavor than Dan Pallotta. It is such an honor, like I say, to introduce this man. Dan is an acclaimed author, TED speaker, and trailblazer in nonprofit innovation. His TED Talk, The Way We Think About Charity is Dead Wrong, has been viewed more than 5.7 million times. I personally heard Dan speak for the first time at the International Fundraising Congress 10 years ago. Honestly, it blew my mind. No wonder his TED Talk has been voted the most persuasive TED Talk of all times. He describes so clearly, so eloquently, so many thoughts that many of us have about our sector. The double standards, the limitations, the countless times I've quoted different parts of his talk. He absolutely nailed it. Dan, thank you so much for being here. It's such a pleasure, like I say. And to kick things off, I'd like to ask you basically what's motivated you to devote yourself to change?
Well, first of all, Deanna, hi, good morning. Nice to be here. Hello to everybody that's tuning in from all parts of the cosmos. Glad to be with you this morning. What motivated me? I grew up in the 60s. I was born on the first day of John Kennedy's presidency. So, my formative years were spent around the speeches of these young leaders, John Kennedy, who had a consciousness about, as he said, the people living in the huts and villages of half the globe. His brother, Robert Kennedy, saying that the future is not a gift, it's an achievement. Or Martin Luther King talking about how the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And, that was very inspiring. Cool. I'm new to the planet. Great. We've got like really wonderful visionary leaders. This is awesome. But at the same time, if you grew up in the 60s in the United States, you grew up watching your parents pretty much every single weeknight watch Walter Cronkite on the CBS Evening News report on the daily body counts in Vietnam, bloodied American soldiers being carried onto helicopters and burned out Vietnamese villages. And you got the idea that the human condition was futile. You got the idea that adults had resigned themselves to the world as it is, to being powerless over the problems that confronted them. And you had evidence of this because they couldn't explain to you why Vietnam was happening, why it couldn't stop. Not even the president could explain why it couldn't stop. And that was demoralizing and boring and depressing. But then if you grew up in the 60s, I was watching every single mission leading up to Apollo 11, every docking maneuver, every orbit, every test of the lunar module, leading up to Neil Armstrong walking on the moon. And that gave me the sense that human beings are capable of absolutely anything we set our minds to. So it was in this cauldron of, hope and despair, or inconsequential versus transformative, that I had to make a decision. And I decided hope, not despair, transformation, not inconsequential. I was frustrated at the world as it was and the lack of big initiatives like Apollo to change it. And so I decided, yeah, I want to make a difference in the world. But if I'm going to do that, it's got to be as big as Apollo, because anything less it is now evident is less than that of which we are truly capable.
Thank you. Good. Yeah, take some water. Good. So just on that last bit, so then can you tell us a little bit about your first sort of foray into activism?
Yeah, when I was a freshman in college, I chaired the Harvard Hunger Action Committee. And we used to do these small campus-wide fasts for Oxfam that would raise about $4,000 a year. And I was, for the first time, studying about world hunger, the massive mortality, 20 million people dying every year, 2/3 of them children, mostly dying of diphtheria and whooping cough and chicken pox, and mostly dying of diarrhea. And in light of those unfathomable mortality statistics, these fundraisers we were doing for Oxfam seemed to me to be inconsequential, puny, and I wanted to do something big, but I didn't have any big ideas. And that's frustrating for all of us when we have the passion to do something incredible, but we don't know what that incredible thing is. And then one day I was riding my bike to the beach, had a little transistor radio on my handlebars, and I heard about these two guys who were riding their bikes across America, the whole continent, to raise money for cancer research. And it opened my eyes. I had been thinking on the confines of the Harvard campus, what can we do here? And it made me realize, well, we don't just need to stay here. So we spent a year organizing. We got 38 other people to agree to go with us, and on June of 1983. What is that? Oh, almost 50 years now. We took a 6-hour flight from Logan Airport in Boston to Seattle, and we spent the next 9.5 weeks pedaling our bikes 4,200 miles across the continental United States. And we raised about $80,000 for Oxfam, and when we pulled into New York, we got to ride around Shea Stadium before the Mets game, and they put us on the Jumbotron, and we got a standing ovation, and they played Chariots of Fire, and everybody was crying. And when we finally came into Cambridge, we felt spent, depleted, emotionally and spiritually, like we had done the most we could possibly do for a cause that we cared about deeply. And more than that, we were not capable of. And that was a feeling I was very hungry to know on at least one front in my life, that I wasn't going to die with my music still in me. And so then I moved to Los Angeles. I happened to be gay. It was the height of the AIDS epidemic. You were losing friends left and right. There were no protease inhibitors. A friend would tell you he was HIV positive. Could be 7 weeks later, he'd be dead. And you'd be going to his funeral, and you'd be meeting his parents at his memorial service. And you were meeting the parents of a lot of 26-year-old kids at funerals without the kid there to introduce you to them. Once again, here's that theme. There is nothing big you can do about it. What could you do about it? You could go on the AIDS walk, walk 5 kilometers on a Saturday morning, get a balloon at the end, and then go have, margaritas and Tex-Mex with your friends. Well, that was completely incongruent with the grief and the love and the anger that you were feeling. And I felt that, the AIDS community needed something big, transformative. So I never forgot the power of that cross-country bike ride that we did. The power of a long journey as a metaphor for so many other things. And so it started with this relatively small event. We created this event called California AIDS Ride. And it was a 7-day bike ride from San Francisco to LA. And you had to go the whole 7 days. You had to go the whole 600 miles. You had to sleep in a tent every night. And what was new is you had to raise a minimum of $2,000 in order to do it. That sounds commonplace now. It had never been done prior to that. Up until then, these Thon events welcomed people with open arms, no matter how much or how little they had raised. We're just glad to have you. Well, that's wonderfully democratic, but it is not a very powerful revenue model. And we didn't market the AIDS rides to athletes or to cyclists. We marketed it to average people who had it in them to do something extraordinary. So that first AIDS ride netted a little over $1 million, which was much more than we hoped. So we began expanding the AIDS rides all over the United States, and we did them from Austin to Dallas, Texas, from the Twin Cities to Chicago, from Boston to New York. We did it across the Continental Divide in Montana, from Anchorage to Fairbanks, Alaska, then from Canada into Vermont, then from Amsterdam to Paris. We began expanding them around the world. Then started looking at the issue of breast cancer. My mom's a breast cancer survivor. Same thing. You know someone who's died of breast cancer. What can you do to honor them? Buy a box of pink cereal during Breast Cancer Awareness Month. You know, it's an affront to your love for these people. So we looked at charity walkathons and just said, how is there like a rule? If you're going to do a charity walk, it can't be any longer than 5 kilometers because everybody seems to adhere to such a rule. Well, let's break that rule. And we created a 60-mile long walk from Santa Barbara to Malibu. And that first breast cancer 3-day walk netted 4 times as much as the first AIDS ride. It netted $4 million the first time we did it. So we began expanding those all over the United States. Eventually, they expanded into Canada. Then started looking at suicide, same thing, huge issue, mortality statistics that rival breast cancer. Nobody's talking about it, nothing big you can do about it. So we created a 26-mile long walk, not during the day, at night. You walked at night. And the closing ceremonies happened when the sun was coming up, and we called it Out of the Darkness, and it brought that issue out of the closet. And over the course of 9 years, we had 182,000 people ride or walk in one of those events. They raised almost $600 million. It was more money raised more quickly for those causes than any events in history. We were one of the very first Harvard Business School case studies on social enterprise. And it was not based on some grand, cerebral strategy. It was based on a simple idea that people are tired of being asked to do the least they can possibly do on behalf of the causes that have broken them. People are yearning to be asked to do the most they can possibly do. People don't want to be buried knowing their potential is being buried with them. And so, those experiences taught me everything that I've come to believe about what we aren't doing and what we need to be doing to actually solve problems in the world.
Yeah. My mom did one of those walks, and she said the sense of community, it was absolutely incredible. Yeah, absolutely. I think it touches much deeper.
Yeah, it was a spiritual experience,
Yeah,
there was a spiritual
that's exactly how
power
she
to
described
it.
it. Yes.
And that's, and the massive amount of money came out of that, it didn't come out of some scheme.
So I think probably a good transition to the TED Talk. So why do you think your TED Talk was so popular? And what were you saying in that talk about the way we think about charity? For those of you, or for those of us listeners that are here that haven't, why do you think it was so popular?
Yeah, I was asking and answering a question. Why haven't nonprofit organizations changed the world the way we hoped that they would? And the answer is very simple. That's not what we asked them to do. We didn't ask them to change the world. We didn't even ask them to solve problems. What we asked them to do is keep your salaries and your overhead low. If you keep your salaries and your overhead low, we will reward you with donations. We will reward you with A+ grades and 5 stars on the rating agencies. And so whether or not you were having an impact or solving a problem became entirely secondary because you weren't and still aren't rewarded or penalized on the basis of whether or not you're solving a problem. You're rewarded or penalized on the basis of your compliance to this liturgy about keeping your expenses low. Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's now deceased partner, said, "Show me the incentives and I will show you the outcomes." What are the incentives in the nonprofit sector? If you make a huge difference, you end world hunger. Nobody's going to reward you for that. But if you keep your overhead and salaries low, not ending world hunger, you will be rewarded for that. Peter Drucker, the famous management expert, said that an organization is perfectly organized for the results it produces. So you produce mediocre results, you are perfectly organized to produce that result and nothing greater than that. Our organizations are not optimized to solve the great problems of the world. They are optimized to keep overhead and salaries low. If you want to get more specific, you might say they're optimized to produce whatever impact they can while complying with demands to keep their overhead and their salaries low. So that's the simple but I think powerful point that I was trying to make at TED. We've devised a charitable system that on the donor side is designed to make people feel good about where their money is going and using financial metrics to measure that feeling, completely divorced from whether any problem is actually getting solved.
Absolutely. And I think you've mentioned it already, for example, with that obsession, almost like you were saying, of the low overheads. But can you summarize what you think is wrong about the way we think about fundraising and charity?
Yeah, well, in the TED Talk, I use the metaphor of two rule books, one for the for-profit sector and one for the nonprofit sector. I've since refined that, and I think of it as a prison. The nonprofit sector is in an economic prison, and certainly fundraisers are, and the for-profit sector roams free. So that prison has sort of 5 security features. First, you're not allowed to use money to lure talent away from the for-profit sector. Whether that's CEO or whether that's the head of your fundraising department, you are not allowed. We have a visceral reaction to the idea that anyone would use money as a motivator to help people, but we don't have an angry reaction to the idea that people would make tons of money simply not helping other people. Secondly, the for-profit sector is allowed to advertise on a massive scale, and the nonprofit sector is not supposed to spend any money on advertising or fundraising, which is a substitute form of advertising, because all of the money is supposed to go to the cause. Well, what does that mean? It means that organizations can't tell the public about the good they're doing, about the progress they're making, about the innovations they've come up with. Well, if they can't tell the public about those things, the public isn't going to get excited about them, and the public isn't going to want to give them any more money than they've given them in the past. And you're not going to be able to find new people to give you money. So L'Oreal can spend, $1.5 billion a year building market demand for people to buy more cosmetics. And if the Susan Komen Breast Cancer Foundation spends $2 million on advertising, it's in the news as a waste of donor money and a betrayal of donor trust, because they're trying to find new donors so that there are more people. The for-profit sector, you can take all kinds of risks. The nonprofit sector, you can't in the fundraising arena. You can on the program side. You can do a huge, massive spend on program, and if it fails completely, you're able to book all of that as a program expense. You do a huge fundraising event and it fails, you have to book all of that as an overhead expense. So nonprofits are terrified of trying any innovative new fundraising ideas. If you don't have new ideas, you can't raise more money. And as you quoted me earlier, if you can't raise more money, you can't scale. If you can't scale, you can't solve problems that exist at scale. The fourth thing is time. The for-profit sector can amortize their investments over 20 years, but you make an investment in a new major gift fundraiser and you're supposed to see that result within 12 months. And if you don't, it spikes your overhead and you're asked to get rid of the person as a failed experiment in fundraising, when in fact, if you had waited 2 years, you would have seen a big return on your investment. And the fifth feature of the prison is capital itself. The for-profit sector has a stock market, nonprofit sector doesn't. So, Uber, yeah, here's $2 billion. Try that out. Lyft, yeah, Uber needs a competitor. Here's $2 billion. Go try that out. Snapchat, oh, that could make a lot of money. Might destroy the minds of our children, but could make a lot of money. Here's a few billion. Go try that out. And the nonprofit sector is starved for any growth capital. Or idea capital. So you put those 5 things together. You can't use money to lure talent away from the for-profit sector. Can't advertise or fundraise on the scale that the for-profit sector does. Can't take any risks to grow your organization. Don't have any time to make it happen. Don't have a stock market. but go change the world, right? You just put the nonprofit sector at the most extreme disadvantage to the rest of the economic world, and then we wonder why these organizations aren't changing the world. And at this point, I've been saying this for years, it is now our fault that we aren't demanding change. When I first and others first started to talk about these ideas, it was okay to have a period of, yeah, we're victims of this stuff, but we've now known it for 10 or 15 or 20 years. And it's time to start demanding change, not to just be victims of this prison we're in. It's time to start figuring an escape plan.
Absolutely. So I think just on that last part, what do you think keeps these ideas in place? I think you've made references to it about the different parts of the prison as well as the organizations themselves, but what keeps these ideas in place?
Yeah, what keeps these ideas in place is our addiction to simplicity. We love simplicity. And what's simple? The overhead measure, right? You just take revenue and expense and what went to program, do a simple piece of division, and you think you now have a way of measuring the character of an organization. But of course you don't, because the overhead measure doesn't even attempt to enter the domain of impact. It doesn't even attempt to enter the domain of whether or not a problem is being solved. So that's what keeps it in place, because if you try to violate any of the 5 security features of the prison, the overhead alarm will go off. It's a sinisterly simplistic way of alerting people to you violating the larger underlying canons. You pay a CEO a lot of money and it doesn't pay off for 3 years, overhead goes up. You do a fundraiser and it fails, overhead goes up. You spend a lot of money on advertising or in a large fundraising department, overhead goes up. So that's what keeps it in place.
Absolutely. So I guess on that, flipping, what is the greatest change you'd like to see donors, well, mainly donors, make when giving?
Stop giving to charitable programs. Okay, I know that sounds like heresy. It's the opposite of what we've always been told. Stop giving to fund the new social worker. Stop giving to fund, the establishment of the program in a new country. Ask the organization that you love for a business plan for a massive expansion of their fundraising and fund that so that they can grow and find other donors in perpetuity to fund the new social worker, to fund the expansion of the program, to multiply your money. That's, especially people who have consolidated money, big billionaire, iconic philanthropists. And, I've gotten to speak to a lot of them over the course of my career. That is my advice. Find an organization that you love. What criteria do you use to determine if you love them? Do they have some innovation that they're bringing to bear on the problem, whether it's domestic violence or whether it's, pretrial incarceration or whether it's hunger? Are they doing something new that actually works? Then you want to scale that. And the only way to scale that is to invest in their fundraising. And I continue to see people with huge amounts of money. No, I don't want to give to the fundraising department. I want to put it into the program. Great. You just annihilated the potential of your money. You completely wasted the potential of your money. When you put money into programs, you get dollar for dollar value for that program. You hire a new $80,000 social worker, you get $80,000 worth of value, and that is it, not a penny more. And whatever value that person produces, you put money into fundraising and it expands and multiplies. You can fund hundreds of social workers in perpetuity.
Absolutely. And aligned with the theory of change, right? To your point, that more sort of the overview and that vision. Absolutely. How can organizations, this is a two-pronged question. How can organizations get their boards and donors more engaged? And how can organizations' leaders influence this needed change in our sector? I don't know if you want to answer one after the other. But
yeah, let's tackle the first one. I get to ask that question a lot. How can I get my donors more engaged? And we've gotten used to the sector, like, here are the 10 things that you can do to get your donors more engaged. Sign handwritten thank you notes. Take them on an expedition to the country where you're working. We've found that this particular demographic responds better. You want to know how to get your donors and your board members more engaged? Stop boring them to death with tiny little incremental programs that aren't going to make any difference, that don't excite them, that don't send a shiver up their spine. Start thinking about what problem you want to solve and by when. See, we're too smart for our own good in this sector. And every year we've got some new best practice that we're all interested in. You know, one year it's trust-based philanthropy, then it's catalytic philanthropy, then it's venture philanthropy. Every year it's something new. Let's reimagine philanthropy. You could reimagine philanthropy and not a goddamn thing will change. You could completely reimagine philanthropy because it isn't tied to solving a problem. The question you want to ask is a question a kindergarten kid would ask. What problem are you trying to solve and by when? I'm trying to tie my shoes by 7:30 so I can get to school. I mean, if it isn't that simple, forget about it. And and this is why we're not solving problems, because we're not asking that question. Because when you ask that question, it leads you immediately to all of the things you would need to solve it, including the amount of money you would need to solve it, including the investment you would need to make in fundraising in order to get that amount of money. But as long as you're concerned about reimagining philanthropy, or as long as you're concerned about trust-based philanthropy, you don't have to think about what scale you'd need to be in order to actually solve the problem. That's how you get your donors more engaged. Start thinking on a level that gives them hope, that lights them up, that makes them feel alive, that makes them feel that you're actually alive. And instead of, and write handwritten thank you notes and all that other stuff, but that crap is easy, you know. Whatever you may think of him and others like him, Elon Musk doesn't talk that way. He doesn't talk about, some abstract theoretical construct. I want to get to Mars within the next 10 years. I want to build a tunnel from Las Vegas to San Francisco in the next 5 years. I want to globalize the electric automobile fleet. If you're not speaking that way, there's no chance you're going to achieve any of the things that we really want to achieve.
Absolutely.
And what was the second part of the question again? Remind me.
No, it was more about the leaders. So how can organizations' leaders influence this needed change in our sector?
Yeah, well, that starts with the CEO. You know, I mean, what was Steve Jobs doing? Steve Jobs was saying we're gonna make a phone with no physical keyboard, while Steve Ballmer at Microsoft was laughing at him the day the iPhone, literally laughing at him the day the iPhone was introduced. $600 for a mobile phone with no keyboard. I like our strategy, he said. Yeah, where's Microsoft now? It doesn't have mobile, right? And demanded that phone be when he did the demo for the iPhone, there wasn't an actual working iPhone. It was all Wizard of Oz stuff going on backstage. And they threw their hat over the wall and said, we're putting this thing out in 6 months. And they forced themselves to accelerate everything they were doing in order to meet that deadline. That wasn't the board chair doing that. That was the CEO doing that. The CEO needs to lead the board and needs to lead the board chair. And if it's impossible to lead your board, you need to find a new board. And if you can't find a new board or they're going to fire you, then you go start a new organization and you lead with your vision. You only got one life. It's short and you never know when it's going to be over. So don't waste time putting your vision into action.
Sound advice. Is an investment in fundraising, here's a little bit of a facetious question, taking dollars away though from the intended cause?
No, not if it multiplies the amount of money that you put into it. And by and large, that's exactly what it does. I mean, think about it. If the amount of money you put into fundraising didn't produce more than it cost, you wouldn't have any nonprofit anywhere in the world. They wouldn't be able to function. So it's not some theory, unless it fails, and sometimes it fails. But by and large, money you put into fundraising multiplies the amount of money available not only for programs, but for spending more on fundraising and for the other elements of capacity building. I hate that phrase, capacity building, because it lumped fundraising into it. It had no discipline. It didn't deconstruct the different elements of capacity building. Fundraising does not belong in with capacity building because fundraising has a magic that none of the other elements of capacity building have. What is capacity building? Well, a new facility, technology training, leadership training, all of those things produce dollar for dollar value. Fundraising is the only thing that multiplies the amount of money that you put into it. So you put more money into fundraising, it multiplies the amount of money. You now have more money to scale your program, and you have more money for capacity building, which allows you to scale your program even greater. The breast cancer 3 days are a great example. We began that with a $350,000 investment in risk capital. Within 5 years, 60 months, we multiplied that 554 times into $194 million net after all expenses and unrestricted money for breast cancer research. Now, if you were a wealthy individual, you just lost, say, your wife to breast cancer, you got $350,000, what would make more sense? Go find the world's best breast cancer researcher, give her $350,000, tell her, I read a book. I want you to spend all of that money on breast cancer research and not a penny on anything else. Okay, well, what did you just do? You just bought $350,000 worth of breast cancer research and not a penny more. When she's done with that $350,000, whatever impact she produced or didn't produce, end of story for your $350,000. If you had put it into the breast cancer 3-day idea, it would have multiplied into $194 million for breast cancer research. But that wasn't the end of the story. That was $71 million a year, every year, after year, after year, after year, and growing. So foundations and funders need to, it's unbelievable to me. You're putting all your money into programs. Stop it. You have all the consolidated capital. Start putting that money into fundraising. What is fundraising? It's an investment in strengthening civil society. It's an investment in raising the consciousness of the world public about, instead of Coca-Cola and McDonald's and Apple, the great social problems of the world. That's what an investment in fundraising is. Foundations, the Gates Foundation, all the others, start putting your money into the fundraising programs of the organizations that you love so that they can go out and preach the gospel of what they're doing to new members of the general public all over the world, engage new young people, old people, wealthy people, people of average incomes in solving these great problems, massively expand the base of support.
Absolutely.
And yeah, I just wanted to say, we want to be careful about how we're framing things. Innovation in fundraising can sound like, I need some new idea, or I need to approach my direct mail in a different way, or I need a different message. Innovation in fundraising, that phrase can trap us in this idea of, how do we raise more money without spending any more money? That's what we typically mean by innovation. How do we draw more blood from the stone, right? How do we raise more money without violating that law that we can't spend more money? I'm going to give you a powerful example. So it isn't actually about innovation. It's about having the guts to demand more money for your fundraising department. Simple as that. That's the innovation right there. The University of Southern California. And they're just one example. You can look at any other institution of higher education, at least in the United States. They spent 50 years raising their first $6 billion in endowment. 50 years. They raised the next $6 billion in 5 years. How did they do that? They doubled their major gift staff. They didn't come up with a new message or a new logo or a new website or even a new fundraising idea. They doubled their investment in an existing idea called major gifts. Now, what did they double it from? If I'm speaking live at a conference and I ask people, show of hands, I'll pick someone. What do you think they started with? 4, and they doubled it to 8, right? Yeah. Okay. Next, 2, and they doubled it to 4. Yeah. 6, and they doubled it to 12. No. USC had 270 major gift officers, and they doubled it to 550 major gift officers. There isn't a health and human services or international aid organization in the world with 10% of that number of major gift officers. This is why higher education, forget about the for-profit sector. Higher education, which is nonprofit, this is why higher education is eating the lunch of the health and human services portion of the nonprofit sector and the international aid portion of the nonprofit sector, because they hire incredible talent. They're paying those people 200, 300, 400, sometimes $1 million a year, because that's how talented they are. They are incredibly adept at packaging beautiful brick and mortar visionary ideas like, you can fund the new Harvard Law School, you can fund the new Stanford Innovation Center. Meanwhile, when we hire a half-time major gift officer and we don't have a vision, so there's nothing to package, so our message to the donor is, please, there's a child starving, help us keep our heads afloat, help us fund this year's budget. Well, who the hell wants to do that? If you had a vision of, we're going to end hunger in the next 10 years, we're going to collaborate with 900 other organizations worldwide, here's the plan, it's going to cost us $500 billion, how many billions can we put you in for? Okay, now we're talking. But that is not the way we talk. We have this diseased humility. Look, there's a humility that comes from love, and then there's a humility that comes from fear and signaling. And that's the kind of humility this unwillingness to spend on fundraising is. A humility born of love means, yeah, I'm not going to brag about myself, but I am going to demand not that you give me $10,000, but you give me $500,000 like you just gave to Yale University, because this problem is more important than that law school.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just going to do a small break. Again, this is a reminder to everybody to please use the QR code. Olu, I don't know if you can flash the QR code really quickly and I'm also conscious of time, so I might skip around a little bit, Dan. I have a lot of questions I want to ask you, but I might filter a little bit. I'm conscious that I want to let people also have the time. Maybe just this one, again, when you were describing the prison, the nonprofit, one of the pillars was capital, and that's something that you do talk about quite a lot. Can you elaborate on what you mean by capital and how it can help nonprofits make the kind of difference that they want to make?
Yeah, generally in the nonprofit sector, we hate capitalism because we don't know what it is. We don't know what capital is. All we know is revenue. That's all we've ever been exposed to, revenue. And revenue is supposed to go to programs. We don't understand capital. Capital is money you set aside for growth, or you go out and raise for growth. And it can be in the form of debt. Let's just simplify it. The whole of the economic world uses debt in order to function and to grow. How did you buy your house? You bought it with debt. How did you buy your car? You bought it with debt. How did you buy your iPhone? With debt. You do $66 a month. But the nonprofit sector doesn't use debt. It can't even fathom debt. So here's how you could do a simple example. You've got a powerful program that has demonstrated effectiveness at solving illiteracy quickly in a way that other programs never have. You want to scale that program. You have major gift potential. So you go to a donor and you say, I don't want you to give me any money. I want you to loan me $3 million so that I can hire 5 major gift officers at $200,000 a pop for 3 years, because it's going to take them 3 years to produce results. And by the 4th year, we believe they will be raising $5 to $10 million a year. And we'll give you 20% on your money back, because there is a risk it could fail, and this has never been done before, okay? Stop looking to revenue. Here's what we do. Here's how we think of capital. What's in my petty cash? What's left over in my savings account? Oh, $9,000. Great. I can spend $9,000 on a major gift consultant. No, that's not the way Elon Musk built Tesla. He didn't have enough money to build Tesla. He didn't have near enough money. He went to the capital markets and said, I need this many billions of dollars in order to build Tesla. Great. They give him the billions of dollars. Now he can build it. You need to do the same thing with your fundraising departments. Honestly, I know what you're talking about, and we mean the same thing, but innovation is the wrong word, because this is not an innovation. This is just courage. This is just the courage to massively expand your department so that you can massively expand your programs. And you know, maybe the donor will end up, you can tell the donor, yeah, give us $3 million. If this works, and there's a 90% chance it will, we'll give you the $3 million back plus 600 grand. You can go put that into somebody else doing the same thing. Start using debt, start using capital. That's how we grew the AIDS rides and the breast cancer 3 days. It wasn't because we had the right slogan. It wasn't because of the bikes. It wasn't even because of the distance. The idea was phenomenal. Yeah, but we could never have scaled it if we didn't have money. So we went to banks and we got debt. They had never funded revenue streams before, collateralized revenue streams before. That's what we need to start to do. It is not rocket science. You did it with your mortgage. You can do it with your fundraising department.
Yeah, no, I think just to add to that, I think the main thing that we're trying to say when we use the term innovation, it's exploring things beyond the business as usual. It's exploring things that don't have a proven return on investment, right? That's what we mean. It's about applying an agile methodology. It's about failing fast. So completely agree, right? Everything you're describing is sort of that cultural thing of invest, just invest, damn it, right? But I think that's a little bit what we mean in that area.
Yeah, and when we're talking about boldness and thinking big, right?
Absolutely.
Here's how we in the nonprofit sector tend to think of thinking big. We think catastrophically a little bit less. That's our way of being bold. We just think a little less catastrophically. We don't actually think bold. So I've seen it time and time again. Someone will hear my talk, and then I'll get an email. We just got approval from our board to hire a new major gift officer. Look, that's great, but it's nowhere near the scale of what we're talking about. When you call me and tell me we hired 10, then I'll start to get excited. When you call me and said we hired 100, I'll say, okay, now you're talking.
Absolutely. So what can an individual nonprofit do to get donors and their leaders to make the kind of changes that you're advocating?
I love the way you phrased the question, because you said, what can they do? Because a lot of people will ask me, what can I say? They think it's about the phrase, like there's some magical phrase that they can give their board chair that's going to change everything. There's no magical phrase. But what you can do is establish a donor literacy program. You should write that down. Establish a donor literacy program. And over the course of a year, determine that I'm going to change the way my whole ecosystem thinks. I'm going to start with my staff, because they think in all of these old ways too. Then I'm going to do my board at the same time, all our volunteers, all our major donors, all of our retail donors. And, we're going to develop a curriculum. It's going to be whatever, a 1 day or a 2 day or 6 nights over the course of a year. And we're going to show them Dan's movie Uncharitable, and we're going to show them Dan's TED Talk, and we're going to have them read articles from the Stanford Social Innovation Review on the nonprofit starvation cycle. Simple things, we're going to have them read The Everyday Philanthropist, so that a year from now, everybody in our organization, the staff, the board, the donors, small and large, and the volunteers are all in lockstep. We've been thinking about it the wrong way. We're going to think about it in a new way. So it's what you do, not what you say. People say, well, when somebody sees my overhead, what do I say to them? You've already lost the game because you haven't indoctrinated them in a new way of thinking. So get started today teaching them a new way of thinking.
And one thing, both in the TED Talk and in the movie, you talk a lot about dreams. But I think dreams, they're open for interpretation. They're ambiguous. They're intangible. Don't we need something that's more rigorous, more, I don't know, more real, than dreams?
There's nothing more rigorous than a dream taken seriously. I know you can be intellectually marginalized, especially in the nonprofit sector, for talking about dreams. They're unserious, they're silly, they're sophomoric, there's urgent need to be addressed right now. We can't afford to luxuriate in childish, idealistic dreams. But a dream taken seriously, this seemingly impossible objective, I want to solve this problem by this seemingly impossible date and time, by this date, those are the most sophisticated things known to humanity. You look at the sophistication of the Apollo program. A man on the moon returns safely to the Earth within 9 years. You know, what is that? 18 words, if that. It forces a new conversation. You know, the sophistication of the Apollo program is unparalleled. You look at the sophistication of the rollout of the initial iPhone. All of the things that make us go wow in the world, whether that's the Eiffel Tower or the Sydney Opera House or the building of St. Peter's at the Vatican, they were all dreams. They were all things that human beings had no idea how to do, and they figured it out. And so when you dabble in the arena of things you've already figured out, that you already know how to do, that's the most boring existence to which you could possibly resign yourself.
You mentioned this second nonprofit prison. I'm wondering if that's, you sort of referenced before the prison that we're in, the second nonprofit prison.
Yeah, just quickly, you started to highlight on it when you talked about the innovation that you guys have come up with of bringing organizations together and working together. I think it might be a bigger problem than everything we've talked about prior to this. Let's take Apollo as an example. Okay, there's an impossible achievement. What's the best practice there? Well, Apollo at its peak had 400,000 full-time employees building the stuff that got us to the moon. You know, Boeing built the Saturn V, Ingalls Iron Works built the launch pad, Northrop Grumman built the lunar module. Over here, you had the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA, didn't build anything. 40,000 full-time people doing nothing but coordinating the activities of these 400,000. Hey, here's launch number 2. We need to meet this deadline. Here's the budget. The opening for the lunar module is this diameter, so the opening for the command module needs to be the same diameter. You two companies need to get together on that. So 40,000, 400,000, that's a ratio of 1 to 10, right? 1 coordinator for every 10 builders. Let's take that to social change in community, but it expands to world hunger and things like that. You know, I'm 10 miles from Boston. Let's say we were to use that best practice. Let's say in Boston, there are 50,000 people working on social change. Little foundations, big foundations, little nonprofits, big nonprofits, all the different government agencies, the schools, the courts, the police, 50,000 people working on social change. If you were to follow the best practice of Apollo, somewhere in Boston, there should be an office with 5,000 people coordinating the activities of those 50,000. There is not an office in Boston with one person coordinating that. So you have utter chaos. Everybody working at cross purposes, no goal, no budget, no timeline, all kinds of duplication of effort. Let's take it to a simpler example. It's like if you were going to build a house and you hired a form company for the foundation forms, you hired a cement company, you hired a plumber, an electrician, a roofer, a framer, a floor and tile guy. You didn't tell any of them where the house is going to be, how big the house is going to be, by when the house needs to be built, what their budget is. You just say, go build stuff. Here's some money. That's literally how we're trying. You have fun. That's literally how we're trying to solve social problems in our communities and literally how we're trying to solve social problems globally. Based on this idea that, well, we don't want a top-down approach, right? And we want it bottom up. Well, that's interesting. Because if I go into any one of your organizations, you're organized top down. You have a CEO, and then you have an executive suite, and then you have your managers and your program suite. So what on earth is wrong with leadership and coordination? People are dying for the lack of it.
I'm very conscious of time because I want to let the people listening listen to their questions. I guess just a last one, Dan. Any last point that you want to make? Anything, whether it's sort of general, more inspirational, or more practical of how to get, any last kind of points before we open to the audience?
This is all real simple. It may not be what you want to hear, but it's real simple. As an organization, what problem do you want to solve and by when? As fundraisers, how much money would you need to achieve that objective? And third, how much money would you have to spend on fundraising to raise that much money? It's as simple as that. The reason we like to get much more complicated is because we don't have to put our ass on the line for anything. If you do those three questions, you got to start to put your ass on the line for things. But putting your ass on the line is where the real fun is. The real fun isn't at a cocktail party on Saturday night. That's just boring for adults. The real fun is in achieving impossible things like Walt Disney did by taking a drawing of a mouse and turning it into Disney, or those people that rescued those kids from the underwater cave in Taiwan and had to figure out how to do that, or the building. That's where real fun is. When you're up against it, you're on the edge of your seat, you're feeling kind of nauseous, you don't know if it could happen. That's where the real excitement is. Now look, you may not have the constitution to live that way, and that's okay. That's really okay. But don't then beat yourself up because you're not changing the world. You're not changing the world because you're not being ridiculous enough. If you're not being laughed at, you're not thinking big enough.
Absolutely. That should another quote I'm going to add.
Yeah,
being
that's
laughed
the
at.
one.
Okay. Thank you so much. I want to really open the floor. We have lots of people listening. I'm going to call in Mark from UNICEF and Amy from Social Change Nest, or I think Mark is coordinating. So hopefully you guys have been dropping your questions through the QR code. Mark, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Diana, and thank you, Dan, for the great conversation, and to everyone listening, over 400 people here on Teams and through the multiple LinkedIn streams as well. Thanks very much. Dan, as hoped, you provoked some great questions amongst colleagues listening in, and thanks everyone for posting your questions. Do keep them coming, and we'll continue to monitor them. So with respect to time, we've grouped a few of these around key themes, Dan. So to start, the most popular questions around how to motivate others in support of your approach to being bolder, right? So in particularly, what do fundraisers need to do to change public perception? And people still expect miracles at no cost. And how do you convince society without feeling like a voice crying in the wilderness, was the text of the question. So how to motivate others in support of your approach.
Yeah, I think we've addressed that. But if you look at that question, how to motivate others in support of your approach? Well, if your approach is boring, I don't have an answer to that. I don't know how to motivate people to support something that's boring. That's why I said stop boring people to death with small ideas. Start thinking on a ginormous scale. Join an organization that's thinking on a ginormous scale. Look, it's not impossible. You see other people doing it. You see Mark Zuckerberg doing it. You see Apple doing it. You see, well, they have tons of money. They didn't when they started. My friend Peter Diamandis, who started the X Prize Foundation, I remember him talking to him 14, 18 years ago. He said, Elon Musk is calling me to help him raise money because he doesn't have any money for Tesla. We didn't have any money to start the AIDS ride. So you can be frustrated doing something small, or you can be frustrated doing something big. The choice is yours. But how to motivate people when your approach doesn't excite anybody, I don't have an answer for that.
Okay, loud and clear. We need exciting initiatives, everyone. And then the next grouping is looking forwards, right? So the future role of nonprofits, how particularly this year. It's been significant change in the sector, and I think a new ground for opportunity in terms of a new role for nonprofits. You've argued that nonprofits should think bigger and bolder, even before this year. As tech and platforms and businesses grow larger, do you see the role of NGOs in our sector becoming less or even irrelevant, as the question poses? And can you share your thoughts potentially on the use of AI in fundraising and how this could also change the trajectory of the sector?
The role of the nonprofit sector could become irrelevant only if we allow it to be. Does the growth of tech mean we don't need the nonprofit sector? Absolutely not. Can the growth of tech solve the great problems that philanthropy is trying to address? Absolutely not. As I said in my TED Talk, business capitalism is wonderful. I'm a huge fan of it, and it'll get us 93% of the way there. But the whole purpose of philanthropy is to address the other 7% who are left behind. 100 years ago, it was 20% or 30% that were being left behind. Business, keeps making improvements, but it's reached a ceiling. And the ceiling it's reached is the solving of problems that you can't monetize. How do you monetize the love that a shut-in elderly person needs, that is satisfied when Meals on Wheels comes to their home? How do you monetize the saving of the life of someone who has mental health problems, who may never become marketable in the economy? How do you monetize the love that a kid gets in Special Olympics? That's where philanthropy and only philanthropy can solve problems. So yes, we could become irrelevant to the detriment of that 7% of people, but our need will never, the need for us will never go away. AI reminds me of big data, reminds me of social media, right? Every time some new thing comes along, oh, here's a free thing that we don't need any more money. Here's a free thing that's going to solve all our problems. It isn't free. The reason the for-profit sector invests this huge amount of money in social media, huge amounts of money in big data, huge amounts of money in AI. So if you're still thinking small, I want to make everything happen without spending any money, AI is of absolutely no use to you. If you want to start thinking big about solving the great problems of the world, and investing billions of dollars in fundraising to raise hundreds of billions of dollars to solve those problems, yeah, AI might start to have application. But if you're a tiny little nonprofit thinking AI is somehow coming to your rescue, you're living in a fool's paradise.
Thanks very much. And the final question for now from the chat is linked to your approach to capital, right? And how the sector should be more confident in talking about capital. Can you reflect on how venture philanthropy and impact investing trends, do they go somewhat to resolve that approach? Is that the beginning of that? And how would you reflect on those trends for nonprofits?
What was the first one you mentioned?
Venture philanthropy.
Yeah. Venture philanthropy. That phrase started, about 20 years ago, and the idea was these nonprofits are terrible. I'm going to go out and find my own nonprofit. I'm going to go find the best nonprofits who are producing results, and I'm going to fund those. But what do you think foundations are trying to do? There's absolutely nothing new about that. And then what was the second thing that you mentioned?
Impact investing.
Yeah, impact investing is not philanthropy. It's like basically it's a no sin policy, or I want to fund things that are going to address climate change. I want to fund a solar panel company. Okay, great. That doesn't address the needs of these 7% of people for whom things cannot be monetized, because in order to do impact investing, you have to be able to monetize something. So here again, this is where philanthropy comes in. So I would not, it's not to say impact investing isn't great, and it isn't better than non-impact investing, but it isn't solving the problems, or even in the domain of addressing the problems that you and I are here on this conference today to discuss. It's an entirely different domain of problem that cannot be monetized, that only philanthropy can solve. And that's why you have to go out and sell philanthropy. That's why I'm not a big fan of nonprofits finding other revenue streams, other sources of revenue other than philanthropy, because that means you've given up on philanthropy. And you've given up on philanthropy because you haven't invested enough in it. USC has not given up on philanthropy. They've doubled down on philanthropy because they've seen what happens when you double down on philanthropy. You raise a lot more money, you start to grow. That's what our nonprofits need to do. Set aside all of these crazy buzzwords and new best practices and new fads and I set it all aside. It's not for you, not if you're truly interested in philanthropy and helping the least among us, and in creating a world, as Buckminster Fuller said, that works for everyone with no one and nothing left out. If you want to create a world with no one and nothing left out, stick to philanthropy, double down on philanthropy, decide what problems you want to solve, by when, and raise the money that you have to philanthropically for that. Go out and excite people in the market. about solving those problems with philanthropy the same way we excite people about the taste of chocolate and the sound of music.
Thanks so much, Dan. Yeah, excite people, double down, and don't give up, I think is a great mantra for where we're at in the sector this year. Thanks, Dan. I'll pass back to Deanna.
Thanks, Mark. So yes, I think first of all, just to thank everyone for the great questions. I know that we were able to sort of bundle, so hopefully that covered a lot of the array or different tastes of it. And again, just a huge thanks to Dan for being with us today. I wish this was a live. We could do a standing. But anyway, such an insightful and thought-provoking chat. You never disappoint, dear Dan.
Yeah,
I'll
my
clap for
thanks,
everybody
my
else.
thanks to you, Deanna, because you've asked me to come to deliver these kinds of messages. So the only reason I'm being like a football coach is because I don't want to waste your money. I know you, and I don't want to waste anybody's time. Like we know the things we have to do, and it's time to start doing them. And that's what you said in your opening remarks. So my hat's off to you, everybody who's here today listening to me preach. Go out and have some fun by doing great, big, ginormous stuff.
Big things.
All right. Take care.
Thank you so much, Dan.
Bye now.
So like I mentioned, we're now moving on to the second half of our summit, and this is the showcase of our Beacons 2025. So like we said, these represent some of the most promising new funding models emerging and lighting the way forward. And what better person to take us through this than Anne Lauridsen, team leader of International Product Development and Innovation SOS Children's Villages International. Over to you, querida Anne.
Thank you, Diana. Yeah, and thank you to Dan, who I think is already off. I'm sure we could spend hours kind of discussing and exploring the implications of the input given by Dan on fundraising, on charity, and I'm sure we will. But for now, the show must go on, and we will head straight into the second part of our summit, Beacons 2025. So, what again is a beacon, you may ask? I think it was echoed well also by Dan. We need to think big, and we aimed for this time around. It's an early stage innovation funding model, showing proof of concept and having high income potential. So what is it not? It's not just an idea or just an improvement to ongoing fundraising. And I'm doing this on the last part because I know the everyday challenge of actually keeping our existing fundraising models performing. Still, we want to think big, and particularly for the innovation this year, we wanted to push our sector. So for our or for the sake of transparency, I want to share a few words on the process. Some of you are familiar with reimagining fundraising, some are new. And as mentioned in the introduction also of Diana, we are a network of innovation enthusiasts trying to accelerate innovative fundraising solutions. And in 2025, we are 13 INGOs, or so-called co-initiators, who have taken part in this journey. Right. How is the process to find the beacons of this year? First of all, we made a call for projects among the 13 co-initiators, particularly calls that are looking for projects that really have the beacon aspect that goes beyond. And we were happy to receive 22 nominations. Here again, a big thank you. As a fundraiser, I would love to just showcase all of them. But we won't, but still a big applause for everyone who shared their precious projects. We will come back to you. The 22 nominations were also evaluated according to the criteria of innovation, scalability, and I think the slide just turned a little too quickly. Thank you. And income potential. We were reviewing the projects and selecting the highest scoring ones. Here again, just to be transparent, so we have a minimum of 7 evaluations per project. each organization or co-initiator were not evaluating their own projects. And by that, we ended up here today with the 5 beacons, so the top scoring projects. Yes. And let me introduce you a bit to the main trends we found while evaluating the nominations. And I think these are extremely exciting. So from, on the one hand, crypto to capital impact investment tools. Here again, this trend merges decentralized financing with regulated investment products, kind of enabling mainstream investors to support humanitarian causes through mechanisms like exchange traded products and crypto staking. So really going into fields of investments. Secondly, humanitarian fundraising via instruments such as insurance instruments. This trend taps into established financial instruments, in this case related to insurance product, to create innovative fundraising models that provide that protect vulnerable populations from climate-related disasters. And we will see a promising example of how humanitarian actors can actually leverage these existing value chains to build anticipatory, scalable, and also financially sustainable solutions for climate resilience. Thirdly, impact-linked and outcome-based financing. Again, I'm hearing Dan in the back of my mind. I think that's exactly also the beauty of this trend, kind of linking our fundraising efforts to program impact. Here, funding is increasingly tied to measurable results and impact, not just activities. The models are impact bonds or impact-linked loans that adjust financial term based on performance against more social metrics, driving accountability, impact, and also efficiency in humanitarian and development work. All right, last but not least, the fourth one, decentralized and participatory giving. Again, this is lived in many ways. One part this trend is showing is the rise of blockchain-based systems that empower donors to become co-creators. So through DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, if I'm not wrong, and tokenized engagement, supporters can fund causes, shape campaigns, and govern impact, ushering a new era of transparent, inclusive, and digitally native philanthropy. So you will see these exciting trends echoed, mirrored, showcased in the 5 beacons of this year's summit, including also a free pass to our next edition next year. All right, we are getting ready. In a second, you will see pitching videos from the following 5 beacons. And yeah, I will not go too much into detail, just to make sure we have time enough. First, to open the stage are Alvaro Cosi from Switzerland for UNHCR, Senior Innovation Lead, presenting together with Mario Stefan, Head of Philanthropy, Diversification and Impact by Médecins Sans Frontières. Yes, bring up the applause. Great. Actually, this is a beautiful example of how synergies and learning, hey, woohoo, great. I'm just going to lean back and let that wave of applause continue. Yeah, but it's a beautiful example of how 2 organizations are actually coming together around the topic of staking for good, and thus leading to much better results. So briefly said, it's about blockchain and cryptocurrencies and how they're opening new ways to embed solidarity into digital finance by turning staking rewards into sustainable donations. And I will leave the 2 to show and explain a bit more of the details. The next one is from UNICEF, Edgar Octavio Soles Chavez. Sorry, my pronunciation. Innovation Officer at UNICEF. What he will present is the Today and Tomorrow initiative. Yeah, okay, applause, round of applause, woohoo! This is the first global climate and disaster risk financing platform for children, combining resilience investment with parametric insurance for rapid disaster response. So stay tuned. Edgar will explain more what this is about. And another familiar face, Alvaro Cosi. I will not again say your title, Alvaro, but it's great to see you. Obviously, there is a great mind there with innovative ideas. Here, as number 3, it is another project called the Cardano Impact for UNHCR, ETP. And ETP is Exchange Traded Product for those who might not know the abbreviation. And this is the first humanitarian exchange traded product, already with the $700,000 ADA, so that's the cryptocurrency, invested. Again, I will leave the details for you, Alvaro, and your pitch to explain that. So the third project, fourth, is, okay, drum roll, woohoo, Eugenia Kovina, Fund Development Manager from SOS Children's Villages. What she will explain and share is how they set up an impact-linked loan for education. And this loan is a $400,000 investment to expand a school in Ghana with repayments linked to the educational impact. And within this topic, I'm also very happy to present Carolina Cuevas from UNICEF Colombia, Social Inclusion Specialist. Since these two projects are in nature quite related, here this is about outcome-based financing ecosystem. And if you want another abbreviation, it's OBF. So this ties to funding, ties funding to measurable results across child development, education, protection, nutrition, and climate resilience by orchestrating partnerships and frameworks around social impact bonds, development impact bonds, and performance contracts. So give both of them, Eugenia and Carolina, again a round of applause. Great, they made it so far together with the other nominees. Yoo-hoo! All right. And as promised, we have a 6th candidate, Gareth Ferry. And I think, Gareth, you are on the call and it's midnight, so thank you for your, I don't know, eagerness and willingness to join. You really intrigued us with your project, and we want to hear more about the results coming out of your project. So please do put a placeholder in for 2026. We have a free pass ready for you for our next summit. And what is Gareth's project about? It's a human rights DAO and token project. So it introduces, again, a blockchain-based way to fund and govern human rights work. But it's quite different because in this sense, here supporters contribute micro-donations through the human rights token, HRT. Donors become co-creators by shaping campaigns, allocating resources, and driving engagement, building a transparent and participatory system of solidarity finance for a digital generation. Super exciting to see what comes out of this, particularly also for many of us who are in quite big, heavy structured NGOs. This is quite radical. So thank you, Gareth, and hasta la vista. So in a bit, we will see a 3-minute video from each of these projects. Make sure to make a mental note of your favorites while you see the videos and have your mobile ready. Since you will have the chance to vote and decide which one of these 5 fantastic projects will win the Innovation Summit 2025. What is there to win besides recognition, fame, a trip to the International Fundraising Congress, IFC, all expenses paid in 2025 or 2026. The winner chooses. All right. Are you ready? Yes. Drum roll. Oh, we should really have had a drum roll here, right? Sorry, you have to mentally imagine that, audibly imagine that. And you're really ready, right? Let's go for it. Let's go for it. We are almost there. So, okay, Olo, I'm happy for you to have you as a tech support because now we start. Opening the Innovation Summit 2025 beacon is number 1, Staking for Good with Alvaro and Mario. Okay, hit play.
Hi there, I'm Alvaro, Senior Innovation Lead at Switzerland for UNHCR, the national partner of the UN Refugee Agency in Switzerland.
And I'm Mario, and I work for Doctors Without Borders, or Médecins Sans Frontières, or MSF, in charge of our Web3 projects out of Geneva and Switzerland.
Humanitarian needs are at a record high, while traditional donations are struggling to keep pace. We urgently need new, sustainable ways to support humanitarian action. That's where we turned to an unlikely place at first, blockchain. We are here today together because reimagining fundraising is not about your idea or my idea. It is sharing common practices for the better good of the sector.
So what's taking? People who hold cryptocurrency on the blockchain can earn rewards simply by keeping their assets active in the system. That's what staking is about. So imagine it to be like earning interest on your savings account. Now, where's the innovation? Instead of keeping those rewards, people can choose to donate them to a cause they believe in. Their assets remain safe, and the rewards create a continuous flow of funding and a continuous flow of giving.
3 years ago, UNHCR became the first humanitarian organization to launch a stake pool on the Cardano blockchain. Supports the school dedicated their assets, and the staking rewards started funding refugee programs automatically and sustainably. Since then, over 200 people have joined, with more than $6 million delegated, generating ongoing support for refugees around the world.
And that project was an inspiration for us, and we decided to launch something slightly different, but in the same spirit. And a year ago, we launched our Stake to Care initiative on Ethereum, a blockchain protocol with a much higher market cap, and a proof that this model is replicable and powerful. Since then, we stand at over $1 million dollars equivalent delegated, and together, we believe that those projects are building a movement where humanitarian funding is reimagined through blockchain technology.
If just a fraction of global staking rewards were directed to humanitarian causes, we could unlock hundreds of millions in sustainable funding each year without asking people to give up their assets.
They did the first step, we joined, and we hope that more will follow. Together, we open a new era of transparent and community-driven fundraising. This is not just innovation, it's the future of giving.
Woohoo! Big round of applause. Super inspiring. Thank you so much, both of you. I know you are on the call. Well, we go straight to Beacon 2, Today and Tomorrow by Edgar and his team.
Hello, thank you for considering our Beacon, the UNICEF Today and Tomorrow initiative. The challenge we were trying to solve was really the need for funds to respond to climate disasters for children. Over the past 50 years, the number of climate disasters has grown fivefold, with the need for humanitarian funding set to double by 2025 at the current pace. Additionally, funding for today's resilience work is limited and the need is also growing. With over 1 billion children living in climate vulnerable countries, we were also seeing that when a disaster strikes, the funding system doesn't always work. If the crisis isn't on the news, money often doesn't come. And even when it does, it takes too long to arrive. And when it finally does, it is not flexible and often can be used where it's needed the most. Therefore, we came up with Today and Tomorrow. Today, to raise funding for today's programs for building resilience and preparedness on the ground. Tomorrow, if the worst case happens, we have access to flexible funding at scale through pre-arranged financing. We started by looking to address the tomorrow part by looking at existing financial tools like catastrophe bonds and parametric insurance, but none of them were designed with children at the center. So we asked, what if every dollar raised could do two things at once? Be resilient today with traditional fundraising, and also be ready for tomorrow's response with a child-focused risk transfer instrument, today and tomorrow. In this short animation, you'll see how it works.
But how does it work? A premium is paid to private sector insurers. If a cyclone meets certain criteria of speed, number of children affected, and magnitude of impact captured by UNICEF's bespoke Child Cyclone Index. Then an insurance payout is made available to immediately respond to the emergency.
This is the first child-focused model of its kind, and it's helping UNICEF rethink how we prepare for climate disasters. Why should you vote for this beacon? Because it works. In just the first 2 years, we secured funding from a new donor to purchase the entire 100 million cyclone risk coverage. We also brought in support from corporates, philanthropists, and foundations, and mobilized internal UNICEF resources to align nearly $11 million for today's programming. Thanks to the Tomorrow component, we've already responded to 23 cyclones, delivering over $11 million in payouts to support to children and communities. Voting for our beacon means expanding awareness of this proven innovative model, so millions more children are protected from the growing threat of climate disasters. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Edgar and his team. I'm getting so excited and actually quite hopeful for us as a sector with these fantastic projects. One note, sorry if I think there is a little bit of a lag on the audio side. My apologies. Anyway, we will move on straight to project number 3, the Cardano impact for UNHCR ETP. Bring it on.
Hi there, I'm Alvaro, Senior Innovation Lead at Switzerland for UNHCR. You've seen now how blockchain staking can generate sustainable funding through our humanitarian stake pool with refugees. Our next step was to bring this idea into traditional finance. Well, we created an ETP, an exchange-traded product, the Cardano Impact for UNHCR ETP. So first, for those of you who don't know what an ETP is, here is a bit more info about it. An ETP, or exchange-traded product, is a financial instrument that you can buy or sell in a stock exchange, a traditional stock exchange, just like a share. And here's the innovation. The assets behind these ETPs are staked. This means that for each share of the ETP that is being bought by investors, the equivalent amount of digital assets are purchased and then staked on our humanitarian stake pool. Well, this means investors don't have to choose between financial returns and social impact. This ETP, they can achieve both at the same time. And importantly, it makes staking for impact accessible to a much wider audience. Many classical investors are curious about digital assets, but don't want to open crypto wallets or trade on crypto exchanges. With this ETP, they can simply invest through the stock market in a regulated product they understand and still contribute directly to humanitarian impact. By launching Cardano Impact for UNHCR ETP here in Switzerland, one of the world's leading financial hubs, we're showing how humanitarian innovation can scale into mainstream markets. Custody and staking are operated by Taurus, a FINMA-regulated securities firm and the market leader in digital asset infrastructure, based in Geneva as well. This ensures that the ETP is managed with the highest level of security, compliance, and reliability. But what about hearing from Taurus directly about what it means?
This ETP demonstrates how a familiar financial product can be transformed into a sustainable source of humanitarian funding. If even a fraction of digital asset ETP followed this model, hundreds of millions could only be unlocked each year to support people forced to flee, without asking investors to give up their assets.
From pioneering the stake pool to launching an ETP, we're building bridges between innovation, finance, and humanitarian action. Together, we can turn investment into impact and shape a future where finance works for humanity.
Thank you. Another very convincing project. Big applause. Right, we will move on, and I'm happy to now move on to the Beacon 4, Impact-Linked Loan for Education by Eugenia.
Hello, I'm Eugenia, the fundraising team lead for SOS Children Villages, Ghana. At SOS Children Villages, we envision a world where every child belongs to a family, grows up with respect, love, and security. In Ghana, this vision is being achieved through the provision of alternative care for children, family strengthening services, advocacy, youth development projects, and inclusive quality education. One way we are promoting inclusive quality education is through the operations of our SOS and our minor schools in 4 locations. In 2017, an assessment conducted on the school indicated that its financing from the core budget should be brought to an end. This did not impact majority of our students, but impacted the 13% who had children in need of our services. To ensure the school's viability and sustainability, whilst ensuring that no child in need is left behind, there was a need for a capital investment. This is to expand existing infrastructure and increase the student body, improve teaching and learning, while ensuring affordability. This is where Roots of Impact and iGravity came on board. We got to know about them from our SOS networks. We studied their requirements, engaged them on their impact-linked loan, have several virtual meetings with them. They had in-person field visits to see our schools, interact with teachers and children. They were thrilled about our model. After a due diligence, 2 metrics were agreed on. These impact metrics were: 1, to increase the number of children from low-income backgrounds in our schools, and 2, to bridge the gap between the highest and the lowest performing students in our schools. And these metrics determine the interest rate of the loan repayments from 0 to 5% only. The higher we perform on the impact matrices, the lower the interest rates. This was terrific news because the market rate in Ghana is at 30%. Do you want to replicate this Nobel funding in your projects? Then I recommend that your project should primarily benefit children in need. Also, you should have strong corporate governance in place and also ensure that the investments will yield the needed return on investment. Dear fundraisers, the fundraising landscape is changing, and we all therefore have to look towards innovative funding. Vote for SOS Children Villages Beacon, which is striving to leverage on such funding, such as the Impact Link for Education Fund, by Roots of Impact and iGravity, to ensure that children in need continue to dream, aspire, and reach their fullest potential. Thank you for your votes.
Great. Thank you, Eugenia. Fantastic, very different hands-on project that shows impact. Great. Then, last but not least, are you still here? Are you with me? Now we will see the last exciting beacon, number 5, by Carolina Cuevas on outcome-based financing.
Hi colleagues, I'm Carolina Cuevas from UNICEF Colombia, and I am so glad to share our beacon with you. Well, when we look at how social projects are funded right now, we often see the same challenge. Plenty of good intention and cooperation resources, but too little solid evidence about real impact. Do we know if our efforts are really making a difference in people's lives? I'm not sure. Well, that's why our beacon is not just another initiative, but an effort to build an ecosystem of result-based financing for children and their communities. Our goal is to move from isolated projects to true collective impact. How can we make investments deliver real, measurable change? Well, take education sector, for example. We can build a school, deliver kits, or train teachers. But if children still can't read or understand a text at the end of primary school, can we call it success? Paying for results means we pay only for independently verified success. Effort matters, but if you don't score the goal, you don't win the game. So imagine programs fully paid only when a child can read, when family conflicts drop, or when communities adopt climate resilient practices. With this beacon, we can bring together governments, businesses, civil society, and donors to focus on the outcomes that truly matters. UNICEF will leverage our resources and partnerships so that we multiply effort instead of competing. This vision comes from several years of research and testing from performance-based contract design in ECD or exploration in blended finance models. But at the end, we have one big lesson learned. We need to develop an ecosystem of result-based finances tied to territorial management and a culture of collaboration. Today, we are applying this strategy to critical challenges like including children with disabilities in the school in Barranquilla or improving reading comprehension in Catatumbo region, always guided by evidence and accountability. Our beacon seeks three major outcomes. First, collective impacts align all partners' agenda around measurables result in each territory. Second, new capital through blended finance, multiplying every dollar invested. And third, proof of the highest social return, showing how each dollar can create 4 to 10 times its value for children and communities. This evidence will attract funders and build shared trust that transformation is possible. We know that Reimagining Fundraising partners share this vision, and we already feel like winners by sharing this invitation with you to be part of this ecosystem focused on result and collaboration through financial mechanism. Thank you.
Thank you, and a big round of applause, not just for Carolina, but for all 5 beacons, and also to all of them and everyone who has been involved in making them happen. Extremely inspiring, creating hope to just see these fantastic projects. So, and now it's time for you to get active. Get your mobiles out of your pockets and scan the code that you'll see in a moment to vote for your favorite. So one thing said, I'm of course an extreme fan of Eugenia from SOS Children's Villages, which is also my organization. But this time around, let's see if we can take our organizational loyalties a bit on the side and look for what is, that beacon that will show light for the years to come on income generation fundraising, and vote for that one. And one little thing too, please only vote once. All right, so you need, yes, here it is. Here's the QR code. We will keep the voting open for a few minutes. And as far as I know, those who are following us here on the live stream, it's a bit tricky to use, right? You're not able to make the vote if you're on your mobile phone. So go give your vote to the most innovative of the 5 beacons, the most promising one. Yes. And if you need it, you can take a little dance, a little move, take a sip of water.
We stand together. Nothing will make us fall. We fight together. Together we'll risk it all. We rise together. Wherever, whenever we stand tall. We stand together. We stand together. We stand together. We stand together. We stand together.
Keep the votes coming.
We stand together. Nothing will make us fall. We fight together. Together we'll risk it all. We rise together. Wherever, whenever.
that was a smooth transition. Let me just share before we move on and you hear the drum rolls that the music you heard, which we all should have danced together to, was by the artist Zen, also known as, and this is not going to sound right, Juan Guerrieri Maril. So thank you, Juan. That is a fantastic song. Okay, I hope you were all active on the vote and that it worked. You have to be grateful these days. I'm just checking if I have a count. How many votes are in? All right. No, that was just a teaser. So the last call, come get voting. 219 have voted. That's already great. If there are a few still who haven't voted, go for it. Okay. So we continue with a few teasers, and now I think we are getting there. Yes, let's show it. Olu, what's the result? Ooh, a tight run. Okay, so drum roll again. I don't know, whatever you have, hit it. The Cardano impact for UNHCR ETP is the winner. So big round of applause to everyone of the 5, and particularly for you, Alvaro. We will somehow all remember your face, I think, since we've seen it a couple of times now, but congratulations. If it's possible, Alvaro, can you maybe turn on your web camera and unmute? Let's check. Yes, I see you. Congratulations. I hope to see you at the IFC either this year or next year.
Yeah, thank you. No, thank you for voting for the concept. Super happy about the win, and super happy about the other ideas that we see. Yeah, thank you for also to the entire team, for UNHCR, and for my managers who actually let me work on this and spend time on this. I think it's also very important.
So, you know, Alvaro, I think that is kind of going straight to one question at least. We don't have that much time, but what would be your kind of top tip to people listening in today to get innovation projects going and accelerate them?
So I would say, like, first of all, it would be like find your allies, meaning like there's always like someone who has a problem or a challenge to be solved within the organization. So maybe work with them and see if you can find like a way to find a solution out there. At the end of the day, we're only like connecting solution to challenges. So in our case, in Switzerland, I always say that we're never going to be developing something, but hey, maybe there's something out there in the private sector, in our case, that could work as a solution for some of the challenges that we have. So that's how we proceed. Once you show that you connect both, usually it's easier to convince people.
Wise put. What is the kind of next big milestone now for you in your project?
So we have a few projects in the pipeline, continuations of this one. Obviously, we've been focusing on the ETP lately a lot because it's a completely new product. So we're organizing, we're going to pitch it here at Building Bridges. It's a big like impact investment conference in Geneva. And we're going to hope to actually convince more institutions to list it, because so far we have a few who listed them, and it's very encouraging after only a few months. So that's the immediate next objectives.
So we're all cheering for you and keeping our fingers crossed. Super inspiring again. Congratulations, and we will meet and hear each other again. So thank you, Alvaro. And I think with this, maybe just again one big applause from everyone who's here for Alvaro and everyone who was involved, plus also the 4 others. Right, we are indeed coming to an end, and I will hand over to my esteemed colleague, Juan Moniz, Global Head of Innovation at UNICEF and also co-founder of Reimagining Fundraising, for the closing remarks. I'm going to say this one since you put this in my brain, and you are always good for a good saying. We can also actually call you Kung Fu Panda, or we can even make a verb out of Kung Fu Panda, so we can Kung Fu Panda the challenges that we're meeting in today's fundraising world. So with these words, I'm handing over to you. Kung Fu.
Thank you so much, and congratulations, Alvaro, and the finalists. I think you all deserve a big applause indeed, and a big award. So thank you so much for sharing, and also a big, huge thank you to everyone that has participated and contributed to making today a success, especially to Olu, who has been suffering in our behind the scenes as a technical master. Thank you, Olu, so much for all of the work you have done. So now I need to deliver two last messages before we close the event. The first one is to the organization leaders in this room, and I need you to hear this clearly. This is not a nice to have summit. This is a call to action. We need you to be brave. We need you to champion change and innovation in our organizations, not just to talk about it. It's time to challenge how we always have done fundraising. We must abandon our risk-averse mindset, and leaders, you must create environments where your teams feel safe to experiment, where trying new funding models is encouraged, where failure is seen as a learning, not as a career mistake. Funds and investment are drastically being cut in our organizations. This is not the time to just anchor down and continue with our business as usual. Tweaking things here and there and improving our results incrementally is great and totally needed, but it's definitely not enough. This is the time to set up a situation room, allow our organizations to explore alternative funding models, those that have the potential to break through income growth. If you think this is an ask that maybe is too heavy for you, at least start an honest, open conversation with your teams and listen to what they want to say. And if they don't say anything, well, that's the first problem you will need to address. But please champion and show with your example the change you want to see, the change you know our organizations need. And the second message is to practitioners in this room. Like any big organizational change, the bottom up is just as important as the top down. Leaders need people like you. Insist over and over again that you need time to explore alternative solutions. Be proactive in embracing failure and suggesting how to block time in your agendas to explore bolder innovations. Get together with other practitioners and jointly convey the needs that you have to innovate. Share, collaborate, share again. Familiarize yourself with becoming audience-centric and data-driven. Embrace agile ways of working and design thinking, and within your sphere of influence, work always in this way. Let me paint you a picture of what's possible. Imagine a future where no team starts from scratch when exploring new funding models and opportunities. Imagine having proven playbooks and roadmaps available for everyone. Imagine moving the starting line forward for our entire sector. This summit is both our burning platform and our beacon of hope. We are here to accelerate innovation, to redefine what's possible, and to build a future where our collective impact truly matches the scale of the challenges before us. The world needs us to succeed. The causes we serve cannot wait for us to figure this out slowly, organization by organization. Let our missions be our driving force. Let the world's urgent needs be our clear targets. Let these beacons and others illuminate our path forward, inspire us to be bolder and to collaborate like never before. And here is the key insight. This is a sectoral challenge, and we can only solve it by working together. Together, we will not just reimagine fundraising, we will revolutionize it. We got this. Let's continue the conversation on our Reimagining Fundraising Group on LinkedIn. We will send an email after we finish this event with the recording of the summit, and with a link so you can share, please, your feedback, because we need your help to improve the next edition of our Beacons event. And please share this with everybody you know in the sector, because I think we are now starting something that we believe it will be a real revolution. Keep innovating and collaborating. Don't give up. And who knows, maybe your beacon will be the winner in 2026. Thank you so much to everyone, and see you soon.